First thing I ever loved about Seattle was the smell of rain on concrete, not the rain itself, the smell of it. That specific moment when the clouds finally break and the whole city exhales. I used to stand outside the firm's front entrance on 4th Avenue, coffee in hand, just breathing it in before the day swallowed me whole. My colleagues thought I was strange for it. Maybe I was, but after 4 years of law school and 2 more grinding through the associate track at Hendricks and Boyle, I needed those 30 seconds. They were mine. My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old. I'm a corporate attorney and I was married to a man who made me feel like I should be grateful he chose me. I want to tell you how that happened. Not because I'm proud of it. Not because the story makes me look smart or strong or anything like that, but because I spent a long time thinking I was the only person in the world who could let something like this happen. And I know now that's not true. I met my husband at a friend's housewarming in Capitol Hill. This was 6 years ago. He was standing near the bookshelf, which I thought was charming at the time. He had that easy confidence that some men carry like a second skin, the kind that makes you feel like the room reorganizes itself around them when they walk in. His name was Elliot. He was 34, worked in fintech, had a startup he described as pre-revenue but positioned well. I didn't know then that pre-revenue but positioned well was just a polished way of saying it made no money and probably never would. We dated for 14 months before he proposed. They were good months, I want to be clear about that. He was funny and attentive and he remembered small things. The way I take my coffee, the fact that I hate overhead lighting, the name of my childhood dog. He made me feel seen. And I was busy. I was so busy. The firm was relentless. And coming home to someone who had already made dinner and wanted to hear about my day. I didn't question it the way I should have. He proposed in the San Juan Islands. A boat. A sunset. The whole thing. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We got married the following September. 94 guests, a venue in Woodinville wine country, flowers I'd spent 3 months choosing. My parents flew in from Ohio. My sister cried. I cried. Elliot looked at me like I was the only thing in the room, and I believed it. The first year was mostly fine. He was still working on the startup. I was covering our expenses, mortgage on the Eastlake condo, utilities, groceries, the car payments, but he framed it as temporary. Give me 18 months, he said. Once we close this funding round, everything changes. I believe that too. The funding round didn't close. He pivoted. New concept, same optimism. I kept working. We kept splitting our finances the way we always had, which is to say I paid for most things and he contributed when he could, which was not often. I told myself this was what partnership looked like. I told myself plenty of things. The small cruelties started so gradually I almost didn't notice them. It was comments at first. Offhand things. You're lucky this firm values hours over talent, or you'd be in trouble. Or, when I'd come home after a 12-hour day, exhausted, barely able to form sentences. You look tired, like really tired. With this look on his face like he was observing something sad and inevitable about me. He had a way of framing his own failures as things that were happening to him from the outside. The startup didn't close funding because investors didn't understand the space. He didn't get the advisory role he wanted because the company had a culture problem. Nothing was ever his, but my accomplishments, my partnership track, my salary, the case wins. I stayed up until 2 a.m. to prepare for. Those he attributed to luck, or to the firm's culture, or to the firms that I was, as he put it once, good at playing the game. I don't know when I started believing him. That's the part that still gets me, if I'm honest. I have a law degree. I've argued in front of judges. I've cross-examined people who were actively trying to deceive me. And somewhere in the middle of my own marriage, I lost the thread of what was real. He was so certain when he spoke. So casual about it, like he was just stating facts. I started second-guessing my work, staying later because surely I was missing something. Apologizing more, taking up less space. The money issue came to a head in year 3. I had a bonus that year, a good one, nearly $40,000, because we'd won a significant case that had been grinding through litigation for 2 years. I mentioned it at dinner, excited. Elliot looked at his plate and said, Huh, you must have gotten lucky on the jewelry pool. I remember sitting very still for a moment. Then I asked if you wanted to use some of it to finally open that joint investment account we talked about. Sure, he said, or I could put it toward the new venture. Get us the point where I can actually contribute around here instead of being carried. That word. Carried. He'd said it almost gently, like he was doing me a favor by naming it. I transferred $30,000 into an account with both our names on it within the week, because he made me feel like it was the right thing to do. Because some part of me thought if I fixed the financial imbalance, the other thing, the feeling of being watched and found wanting, would fix itself too. It didn't. In year 4, the startup officially folded. Elliot announced this over breakfast like he was reading a weather report. Shutting it down, going to consult for a while, he poured himself more coffee and picked up his phone. I sat there waiting for something else. Some acknowledgement of the years, the money, the weight of it, but there was nothing else. That was the whole conversation. The consulting work materialized in the form of 2 clients over the following 8 months. He billed them each once. Then he started having lunches. A lot of lunches. Networking, he said. Building the next thing. Our social life had always been a mix of my colleagues and his, but increasingly it was his friends, his crowd, the fintech and startup people who talked about disruption and scale and always seemed to be between things. I was often the only one in the room with a conventional job. Elliot had a way of introducing me that made this seem slightly embarrassing. Claire's a corporate lawyer, he'd say, with just a breath of deflation in his voice. Like I'd settled. The night everything broke open, we were at a dinner in Bellevue. One of his old startup contacts, a birthday celebration at a restaurant I'd made a reservation for and, as it turned out, would be paying for. There were 8 of us. The conversation turned to career pivots, to risk-taking, to the courage it took to bet on yourself. Elliot was mid-sentence about a new venture concept when one of the women across the table asked me what I thought about it. She was direct, curious, genuinely interested. Before I could answer, Elliot laughed. Claire thinks in liability frameworks, he said. She's risk-averse by training. That's not a criticism, it's just how lawyers are wired. She wouldn't have lasted 2 seconds in the startup world. The table moved on. The conversation kept going. I smiled and reached for my water glass and said nothing. But something happened in my chest in that moment. Something quiet and final, like a door closing. I drove home alone that night. Elliot stayed to keep the conversation going with a few of the other guests. I didn't mind. I sat in our condo, in the kitchen, with the lights off for a while. I am a person who thinks in liability frameworks. I do know how to assess risk. And sitting in my dark kitchen, I started for the first time to actually look. I pulled up our joint account on my phone. The $30,000 I transferred in year 3 was gone. I knew that, we talked about it, though the details had always been vague. What I didn't know was that there had been 4 other withdrawals in the past 18 months, totaling just under $22,000. Small enough that each one hadn't alarmed me. Large enough that together, they were significant. I went through our shared credit card next, the card I paid off every month. There were charges I didn't recognize going back almost a year. A hotel in Portland twice. Dinners for 2 at restaurants I'd never been to. A flight to San Francisco that I hadn't taken. I put the phone face down on the counter. I sat there for a long time. Here is what I knew by the time Elliot came home that night. I knew the money was gone. I knew where some of it had probably gone, and I knew, with the same clarity I feel when I've read a contract and found the thing they buried on page 47, that I was looking at a pattern. Not a mistake, not a lapse, a pattern. He came in a little after midnight, cheerful, loosened up from a few drinks. He kissed me on the forehead and asked if I was okay. Just tired, I said. He went to bed. I stayed up. I want to be clear about what I did next and why. I didn't react. I didn't confront him with a shaking voice and demand answers in the middle of the night. I had done enough reactive things in that marriage. Second-guessed myself, given money I wasn't sure about, apologized for taking up space. I was done reacting, I thought. I was still an attorney, and I knew how to build a case. Over the next 6 weeks, I did the following things quietly, carefully, and without anyone knowing. I opened a new individual checking account at a different bank and began routing my direct deposit there. I contacted my HR department and had my pay stubs sent to my work email only. I requested copies of all financial statements from our joint accounts, going back 3 years. I called a family law attorney I knew from a CAE conference, someone outside my firm, and had a consultation over lunch off the record, as a friend asking a hypothetical. She was not surprised by any of what I told her. She gave me a list. I followed the list. I also, in those 6 weeks, said nothing different to Elliot. I made dinner twice a week. I asked about his consulting. I did not look at him differently, at least not in any way he noticed. This was harder than the legal preparation, if I'm honest. Sitting across from someone at your own kitchen table, knowing what you know and keeping your face still. But I had learned something in those years. He had taught me, without meaning to, how to take up less space. I used it. 7 weeks after that dinner in Bellevue, I had everything I needed. The morning I filed, I woke up early, made coffee, took it to the window and looked out at Lake Union in the grey early light. There's something about Seattle mornings in November. The whole city looks like it's holding very still. I had the papers served to Elliot at noon while he was at one of his networking lunches downtown. My attorney had advised me that serving them at the residence was fine, but I thought it was better this way. Cleaner. He would have a moment in public to absorb it before coming home, and I would be elsewhere. I was, in fact, in a conference room at the firm, preparing for a deposition. He called 3 times. I let it go to voicemail. The messages were what I expected, first confused, then sharp, then something that tried to sound wounded. The third one, he said, after everything I've done for you, Claire, everything I built for us. I listened to all 3 messages once, then I deleted them. He moved out within the month. There was an argument about the joint account, my attorney handled it. There was an argument about the condo, my attorney handled that too. The hotel receipts and the credit card records and the documentation I had assembled over those 6 weeks handled the rest. The divorce was finalized 7 months later. I kept the condo. I kept my savings. I kept my name, which I'd never legally changed. I want to tell you the thing I learned that I think about most. It wasn't about the money in the end. I've paid for things I'm still paying off, and I don't lose sleep over most of it. It wasn't even about what he was doing behind my back, though that had its own particular kind of weight. The thing I think about is the voice, the one that had started living inside my head somewhere in year 2 of that marriage, telling me I was lucky to be chosen, that my success was circumstantial, that I was risk-averse by training, not just in law but in life, that I would never have lasted in the real world, the brave world, the world where people bet on themselves. That voice was not mine. I had borrowed it from him without realizing it, and it had become so familiar I stopped hearing it as foreign. The first week after he moved out, I stood outside the firm on 4th Avenue in the rain, and I just breathed. I had a deposition in an hour. I had 3 motions due by Friday. I had a life that was mine, only mine, fully mine, for the first time in years. Someone on my team came out to ask if I was ready. 1 more minute, I said, and I stood there in the rain that smelled like concrete and exhaust, and Seattle, and I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost stopped looking for it. I felt like myself. That's what they don't tell you about leaving. Everyone talks about the loss, what you give up, who you grieve, how long it takes to stop reaching for someone who was never really there. And all of that is true. I grieved. I had nights I don't want to revisit. But there's also this, the morning you realize the voice in your head has become your own again. The first time you make a decision, any decision, what to eat, where to go, how to spend a Saturday, and you don't brace for it to be wrong. The first time you sit in a meeting and say something and don't immediately scan the room to see who's deflating. I am not standing here telling you I have it figured out. I'm 32 years old and I'm learning. Still, what it feels like to take up the exact right amount of space. But I'll tell you this, I earned everything I have. I worked for it in the way that people who are good at their work and love it work for things, not out of luck, not out of positioning, not because I played a game. And no one, not anyone in any room, not at any dinner table, not with any voice that sounds certain and casual and just like they're stating facts, gets to take that from me again. I made sure of it. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all this happened. Not in an abstract way, in the specific, concrete way that you think about things when you've lived through them and come out the other side still standing. Elliot didn't wake up one day and decide to become the person he was, and I didn't wake up one day and decide to stop believing in myself. Both of those things happen slowly, the way water moves through stone. Gradually. Quietly. And then one day you look down and realize the shape of everything has changed. That's the part that required the most honesty from me. Accepting that I had participated in what happened, not in the way he participated, not with deception or cruelty. But I had been passive when I should have been clear. I had given money without accountability because I thought love meant not keeping score. I had stayed quiet at dinner tables because I told myself it wasn't worth the conflict. I had let a voice that wasn't mine live inside my head for years without ever questioning where it came from. There's something humbling about being a person who is professionally trained to find the flaw in an argument and then realizing you missed the flaws in the argument happening inside your own home. But I think that's exactly what manipulation does. It doesn't come at you directly. It comes sideways, casually, wrapped in the voice of someone who seems to know you better than you know yourself. It borrows your trust and uses it against you. What I know now is that intelligence alone doesn't protect you from that. Credentials don't protect you. A good salary doesn't protect you. A good salary doesn't protect you. What protects you is the willingness to look, actually look, at the patterns in front of you, even when looking is uncomfortable. I avoided looking for a long time because somewhere underneath everything, I was afraid of what I'd see. That fear cost me years and real money, and a version of myself I'm still in the process of reclaiming. The morning I filed, I wasn't angry. I want to say that because I think people expect that part, the rage, the satisfaction of revenge, the moment where you get to feel righteous. I didn't feel any of that. I felt tired and clear, like I'd finished something that had been waiting to be finished for a long time. What Elliot sowed, the small erosions, the borrowed money, the casual cruelties in public, had a cost, not because the universe keeps a ledger, but because behavior has consequences. The way he treated people had shaped who he was, and when the external support was gone, there was nothing underneath it to hold. That's the thing about building yourself up by diminishing someone else. It doesn't actually build anything. I came out of that marriage with less money than I should have had, and more self-knowledge than I'd ever had before. I'll take that trade. If there's anything I want to leave you with, it's this. Pay attention to the voice inside your head and ask yourself, honestly, whether it sounds like you, whether its doubts are yours or borrowed, whether the story it tells about what you deserve is based on evidence or on what someone else needed you to believe. You built what you built, you earned what you earned, and the moment you stop letting someone else narrate your life, you might be surprised how different the story sounds. I was.